Pamela Krieger. She is our EAP rep from Aurora. And we also have Mike Stelter, who is a sergeant from the Sheboygan Police Department. And they're going to be talking about the opioid addiction crisis in Sheboygan County and probably other places. As we hear it every day, we see it every day. We're dealing with students, obviously, who've had experiences in different ways regarding drugs. And I think it'll be a really insightful piece, and I think it's a piece of knowledge we need to have as we continue to work with our students and their families, because there's a lot of those kinds of things happening in our community. So, without further ado, Pamela and Mike, thank you.
Happy Wednesday. I'm Pamela Krieger, and I am with the Aurora Employee Assistance Program. One of the things I get to do is share presentations, training, offering, and that's what we're going to do today. About an hour. Is that your understanding? Excellent.
We have a 3-hour presentation for you. We'll get you out as soon as we can. With that, I'm Sergeant Mike Stelter. Disclaimer, I lost my voice yesterday. I'll do the best I can today to get through this. Hopefully you can hear me. I'll be loud enough. I'm currently a supervisor of Sheboygan County May Unit, so I work in the county where I supervise law enforcement officers from the City Police Department, the Sheboygan County Sheriff's Department, the Plymouth Police Department, and one Falls officer. So I've been doing this job for like 18 years, and I just got my new role last August. And even being in this area for the last 18 years, it's been very eye-opening being out there on the kind of the front lines of the opioid crisis and everything. So I hope you get a lot out of this presentation, even if you don't want to be here and you want to get out of here because it's a nice day and stuff like that. But hopefully you get something out of this you can take back with you.
All right, so what we're going to cover is an overview of substance abuse, the prevalence of opioid abuse and issues, not only locally, but throughout Wisconsin and then nationwide as well. What local initiatives are occurring? We're going to explore and discuss those, and then really discuss some very tangible pieces of things that you can do, because everyone plays a role. So, to get started, did you know substance abuse, which includes drugs and alcohol, costs the United States an estimated A, $109 million per year, B, $276 billion per year, or C, $115 billion per year? Raise your hand for A. B? And C. Okay. The cost, those of you that answered B are correct. And what we're talking about, that's not probably a great thing to celebrate. And what we're talking about is lost work productivity, increased healthcare spending, all sorts of costs and expenses related to substance abuse. And when I talk about substance abuse, I'm talking about illegal substances and legal prescription drugs, including opioids, that could be abused. So, alcohol. What state in the United States is #1 for binge drinking? That was really loud and together. Thank you. Wisconsin is #1. How do we get there? Yeah. So, how we got to be #1 is annually we spent $6.8 billion. Accidents, citations, hospitalizations. 4.9 billion were lost productivity. 749 million alcohol-related health care. 649 million alcohol-related criminal justice. And 498 million alcohol-related crimes. Pretty substantial, right? And again, nationwide, we're bringing it in a little more locally. So, if we spent $6.8 billion in the state of Wisconsin, how many counties are in the state? 72 counties. Where do you think Sheboygan falls? Out of 72. Ranking. Top 10. Yeah. We spent, I know it's pretty small, but we spent $192.8 million of the $6.8 billion that was spent in our state right here in our back door. And so what we're talking about are, it lists 27 alcohol-related deaths, and that's a little dated data. 972 alcohol-related hospitalizations, 888 alcohol-related arrests. So bringing it real, bringing it right here. Anybody else see those signs, those black signs with white lettering that say, "You don't take heroin, heroin takes you"? They've been all over in the county. I've seen them on Highway 23, 57, and on 43. We receive federal dollars as an awareness campaign. Pretty much, you don't take heroin, heroin does take you. And 85% of the time, folks that use that for the first time become addicted. Pretty substantial. So, when we talk on a greater scale and we look at substances, when I say drugs, what do you think of? Most people think of illegal, right? We have to include a lot of different pieces because you can be prescribed a prescription medication and abuse that, right? Absolutely. So when we talk about drugs, we're talking about prescription, so they're legal and illegal. 73% of all drug users are employed. So the perception is that drug users are unemployed and, are homeless. Not true. Not necessarily true. 7.4 million workers used drugs last month. 52% of all workers who tested positive for drugs are daily users. So that includes like those random drug screens at companies and organizations that do random screens. 35% of workers have seen or heard of on-the-job drug use by coworkers, so a third of us.
So, how did we get here? How did we become a nation in opioid crisis, right? Well, it started out with doctors and pharmacists handing out this stuff like it was candy. And we all trusted them, right? Because that's how we grew up. You trust your doctor, you trust your pharmacist, they're the ones with the education. So, if they're handing them to me, it must be okay. Right? That's how we got here, really. That's how it all got started.
So, how did we get here? In 1980s, pain became the fifth vital sign, and the focus was pain relief. So when you go to the doctor, that's what you're looking for, right? Usually most of us that go, when we go to the doctor or emergency room or whatever, it's because it's unbearable pain, right? And so then they have the faces. You guys have seen them, right? When you're in the emergency room, they want you to rate your pain level. And so that was the indicator. Back in the 1980s, they started that. And so the goal and the marker was, we want to reduce your pain. Opiates then were prescribed for treating that chronic pain, which obviously created an explosion in prescription drugs, which led to abuse, dependence, addiction, and overdose.
So, I don't know how good you can see the colors up there, but if you look at that screen, the orange, which is the bottom one, is your heroin overdoses in Wisconsin over a span of 14 years. And you'll see that we kind of laid low for a little bit until 2010, where we spike up dramatically and we continue to rise even today. And a lot of that is because of, in 2010, does anyone know what happened in 2010? That may have changed the course of why heroin became a drug of choice? No? I think there's a slide on it. I don't want to ruin it. No, I'll just tell you. They reformulated OxyContin so that you couldn't abuse it like you used to in 2010. So after they reformulated that pill so that people couldn't crush it and shoot it, what do you think the real smart drug cartels did? They went, we're going to start mass producing heroin and shipping it into the country like mad. Because opiate people that have been abusing that drug, they're going to need it still. So heroin, which was a drug not really big nationwide, maybe it was big on the West Coast, maybe certain parts of the East and South, but not really big in this part for sure. Heroin becomes a huge drug of choice, and what used to be like $80 for a hit goes to $20 a hit, and it floods our markets. And everyone that was addicted to Percocets and Oxycontin that were abusing it up to 2010, they turn to heroin because it's more readily available and it's at a cheaper cost. And that causes our heroin problem. So, pain is the most reason people go to the doctor, right, and go to ER visits. I mean, I've been there where I hurt something on a Tuesday and I deal with it all the way up till Saturday, and I finally had enough, so I go and pay a stupid ER copay, right? Because I didn't go to my doctor during the week. And then approximately 30% of all those ER visits, they end with a prescription of opiate. Has anyone here not been prescribed Percocet or Oxycontin or any of those opiates? Not been prescribed that in their entire life.
And that would happen at the dentist.
So, more overwhelmingly, the room has been prescribed that medication. Approximately 60% of patients that go to the ER for back pain, they're going to leave with prescription medications for the most part. So this is always one that I'm always surprised by this every time I see it, even though I've seen this slide a million times. But here in America, we're the #1 consumer of illegal drugs and prescription narcotics. Yet, we have 5% of the world's population. That's amazing to me. We use 80% of the narcotic prescriptions in our country. I think we have a drug problem, right? Obviously.
So 99% of the Oxycontin that was used approximately 4 years ago, 72,000 tons of Oxycontin. What is that? I mean, you know those are really teeny tiny pills, right? Super small. What do you suppose it would take to weigh that? I mean, I often visualize a dump truck filled. Probably more than that. Did you know that, seeing as we're talking about opioids, that 115 Americans die every day on overdoses? And that was a statistic that just came out literally 3 months ago. So it's very current. 21 to 29% of patients prescribed opioids for chronic pain misuse them. You know, this can happen athletes. A tear, an injury, or something. You go to the doctor and you're prescribed what? An opioid for the pain you're experiencing. In 2016, more than 11 million Americans misused the prescription of opioids, and nearly 1 million used heroin. What we've done in our system now, our healthcare system, is, would you say that was back in around the time that Oxycontin, I think, was reformulated? We have healthcare systems now that are talking to one another. So what happens is I can't go to St. Nick's Hospital and then like at 7 in the morning and then at 11 o'clock in the morning run over to Aurora. Because we have systems now that talk to one another. So it's called Epic. And so prescription medications are logged into a system so that the abuse of prescription medication has gone down substantially due to that. Okay, so what are opioids exactly? Class of drugs that includes heroin, Synthetic opioids, fentanyl, pain relievers available by prescription such as oxycodone, which is OxyContin, hydrocodone, Vicodin, codeine, and morphine. All of those substances. How do they work? Opioids interact with the receptors on the nerve cells in the brain and the nervous system to produce pleasure effect and relieve pain.
So your opiates, basically what they're doing is they're stimulating dopamine, just like other drugs of addiction. This has more an effect on your brain than it actually does on pain, so it's blocking sensors for you, but it's not really helping what the problem is and necessarily changing your pain management, maybe temporarily, but your problem's still going to be there. It causes more brain damage or changes in other drugs, and basically because of its high addiction level, that's how it becomes this sinkhole of abuse real quick. This is interesting, and I've actually tried this, so it works. This was a study done with a bunch of patients, and the question asked was, how many of you are getting 50% of pain relief? And these patients tried all these different combinations of drugs. And you'll see there, shockingly, your oxycodone and your Percocet are not at the top for providing 50% pain relief, but what is? Ibuprofen and Tylenol, right? Because that's actually helping you with the swelling and the pain as opposed to just blocking a sensor. So, recently I had the opportunity to try this out because I had a shoulder injury over last summer, and like an idiot, I asked my wife if I could have one of her Percocets that she got a while back. By the way, that's a felony. Can't do that. That's abuse of prescriptions right there, right? You can't do that. So my wife said that I was an idiot, and she said, that didn't really work for me either, but I did this Tylenol and ibuprofen, this high Tylenol with ibuprofen. You should try that before you commit a felony. I thought, yeah, you're probably right. So I tried that, and it worked out great. It worked out better than Percocet ever had for me. So I'd always recommend you trying that. I'm not saying that that's going to work for everybody, but you got to truly think of different options other than getting the opiates and the Percocets prescribed to you right away. And we understand that some people have surgeries where you have really invasive surgeries, and you may need a harder narcotic to help you with the pain. But always try different options.
When you do take them at home, take the medication only as long as they're needed. Never take more than you're prescribed, right? Oftentimes when you're given a prescription, they'll give you how many? Too many. Yeah. 30. You can start out with a third, and you can always go back and ask for additional. Double check the label to make sure that you're taking the correct pills and medication that's prescribed. Don't crush or cut the pills unless you've been instructed to do so. And always follow those safe medication useful tips. Do not share your prescription, as Mike just said. It's illegal. Store your medication securely. It's one of the things we're really here to talk about as well. What can you do? Store any medications that you do have safely, and dispose of those that are expired, unused, or unwanted.
So your opiates and heroin produce that similar effect. The street price of one of your pills is usually like $1 per milligram. So I mean, that's the big problem with it too, is even if you're not addicted to it, if you can see a quick way to make a buck, then you start stealing it and selling it to make money, right? So if it's $1 per milligram, if you have 20 milligram pills and you have 30 of them, and you're a high school student, and you go to the bathroom at your friend's house, and you see those sitting in the cabinet, and you don't have a job, but you have a car and need gas money from time to time, wouldn't you be tempted to do that? Maybe. People might be. So that's why there's also, besides addiction, it's a quick way to make a buck, which is why I don't leave those things out. Again, you may trust your family, but you don't know their friends that well as you think you do, and you don't know their friends that well. So if you have people in your house, you got to take care of that stuff and hide it. So in 2010, OxyContin got reformulated. I talked about that earlier. Heroin then became more cheaper, more accessible. 4 out of 5 current heroin users report abusing prescription opiates prior to being addicted to heroin. So it truly became that new gateway into our heroin problems that we're having right now. And this is what I was talking about, the reformulation in 2010 of Oxycontin. On the left here, you'll see the original. You could break down this nice powder substance, put it on a spoon, melt it down, put it in a syringe and shoot it. After 2010, you couldn't do that anymore because it became this clumpy, kind of worthless gunk of stuff that you couldn't abuse like that.
The local impact and expense, when you look at it, a couple-year comparison, 2009 to 2014, as you can see, pretty drastic increase. In 2009, we're shaded in about 1 to 9, and then in 2014, it's the darker red, so 30 plus.
50 plus.
Better eyes than me. So what is heroin? It's an opiate that's synthesized from morphine, which is a naturally occurring substance. It appears in a variety of different ways, and what you see on the bottom is the range of what it would look like, or could potentially look like. Usually appears as white or brown and can go black, sticky substance, such as it's called black tar heroin. It's really a substance, it's from the opium poppy plant grown in Central Asia. It comes from the sap and then processed into a powder, which is imported typically through Mexican drug smuggling channels. And when it gets here locally, it's about 20 to 40% pure. It's always cut with some other substance. Again, remember, this is not a prescribed medication, so you don't necessarily know what else is in it. Signs and symptoms. What would someone look like that has used heroin? Small pupils, disorientation. It can be a range. Obviously, again, it's not a chemical or substance that's regulated, so a whole range. Cycles of hyperalertness followed by nodding off, droopy appearance, dry mouth, weight loss, runny nose, sometimes infections or abscesses at injection sites, cuts, bruises, scabs, different things like that. And anybody, do you know how long heroin stays in your system? Not very long. It's a pretty quick-acting substance through your body.
Okay, so we basically started out with the opioid crisis with the pills.
We'll get to it.
which led to heroin addiction, which is now leading to fentanyl and carfentanil being introduced across the nation, not just to the south of us anymore. And this stuff is really deadly, powerful stuff. It's basically a synthetic substance made for pain relief. It was developed in the 1960s. With intended use under a doctor's care. So, I mean, they developed the pain reliever only to be administered under a doctor's care. Eventually, they started to release that stuff in patches. Then we started to see addicts start to get fentanyl patches, and they would cut them up and do all sorts of things with them to abuse them. They were mainly used for terminally ill or severe people suffering from severe chronic pain, is what it was made for. And then its brother carfentanil was developed in the 1970s, mainly to sedate large animals, so it was used at zoos and stuff like that. Not meant for human consumption, obviously. Fentanyl and carfentanil are just kind of like this chemical compound made up of these different parts, and it can get tweaked a little bit and have all these different little spawns of deadly substance. But this is what is mainly being introduced now into heroin as a cutting agent, or just being purely used. People saying it's heroin, but it's not. It's actually fentanyl. So just to talk about the potency level a little bit, so fentanyl is 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin. So we're talking about some pretty strong stuff. And then it's 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. Carfentanil is 100 times more potent than fentanyl. So it's extremely deadly. If you look at the vials, if you can see the substance in there, it kind of shows you like what pure heroin would compare it to pure fentanyl, and then pure carfentanil, and you really can't see anything in the carfentanil pill or the vial there. So it's really strong stuff, and this is, you know, unfortunately this is here. It's in Wisconsin as well as it is everywhere else in the nation.
National drug overdose death rates, again through 2016, you look at the natural and semi-synthetic opioids, methadone kind of tapering off in the purple there, but the green, which is the big spike, the synthetic opioids other than methadone, huge spike, lots of issues. Deaths per 100,000.
So just to give you a better view of what we're talking about here, the deadly doses of fentanyl and carfentanil, they estimate 1 pound of fentanyl is enough to kill 250,000 people. So that's pretty strong stuff. There's enough fentanyl next to that penny to kill 1 person, and then enough carfentanil, which you really can't see, next to the other penny there on the right. And then there's just a red dot in the corner to kind of emulate what it would look like would be enough to kill somebody. So yes, like I said earlier, it's here, it's in your backyard. In Sheboygan County, our last 11 of our last 14 overdoses since March of 2018 were confirmed fentanyl. So it's being abused and used here. We had an investigation with fentanyl being purchased over the dark web with our Plymouth investigator, where they were shipping in fentanyl from China and getting it into Wisconsin here. So it's here, and it's going to be something we got to deal with.
How is it used? Snorting, smoking, or shooting. Either or any. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about progression?
Oh, so basically what they initially start to do is they'll start to snort it or smoke it so that they don't have to use needles to, you know, have puncture wounds and stuff like that. And then they don't feel that much like a junkie, but over time, obviously if you snort that stuff, it's going to kill your sinuses and give you a bunch of health problems. So they'll eventually just all resort to shooting if their addiction continues and continues. Just some different look at paraphernalia here. I think the biggest thing is your picture on the right, which is going to have we'd call that like a heroin kit, and you know, it's going to have your syringe in it and your ties and your little burning, those little candles, the little tinnies you use to melt it down. See little baggies there? I think those are like little $20 bags of heroin, if you can see that. It's not too small. On that picture. Over there.
This one?
No, there. So there where the babies are. Heroin. By you. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah. You can go to the next slide.
So, before I said substances, how long does it stay in your system? Typically, again, there is no real typical, but it can be anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours, where cocaine, amphetamines, other substances has about a 1 to 3 day life. Typically, when I work with organizations and they have drug screens, when somebody has to participate in a random drug screen, I rarely, if ever, get anybody that comes back positive for heroin, because it's very fast acting. Marijuana stays in your system for up to 30 days, so that's a pretty commonly seen substance that comes through my desk. Questions, comments at this point? I know we're in a large auditorium and it might be difficult, but any questions? So when we look and talk about opioids, what would you see physically or behaviorally, any type of symptom associated with someone that may be starting to abuse or use? Extra pill bottles turning up in the trash, so if you see something. Pills getting lost or disappearing. Oftentimes that's a flag, that's a marker. If somebody's going back to their prescriber and saying, oh, I lost them, or they were stolen, or whatever. Noticeable elation or euphoria, marked sedation or drowsiness, so changes, dramatic or drastic changes. Perhaps confusion, constricted pupils. Pupils typically for substance use are pretty big indicators. Really, really big, or really, really small. Slowed breathing, intermittent nodding off or loss of consciousness, shifting or dramatic changes in mood, and other things start changing with the individual, so socially withdrawing and isolating themselves, or possibly sudden financial issues. Because what's driving the behavior? Because we're starting to talk about something called addiction. You know, it can be anybody who has an injury, and it can be a back injury, a sports injury, non-use to use. Use goes to dependence. Use goes to abuse, to dependence, and addiction. Addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing brain disease. Does anybody know anyone who said they wanted to be addicted? Ever? You know, kids don't grow up saying that's what they want to do or be. And we're talking about drugs. What are other addictions? Spending money. Food. Internet. Gambling. So this doesn't just addiction and how it happens, it's not just for substance use. It really affects the brain's reward circuit by flooding it with chemical messages of dopamine. And really this, you know, wherever you're at in the spectrum, the earlier the better to access assistance and treatment.
Just to add in a little bit about addiction, you know, through our investigations that we've had, we've noticed that there's been a lot of like used Narcan, like either in cars that we're on the scene of, or in houses after we serve search warrants. And a lot of times when we ask people like, hey, what's with all the used Narcan, they'll talk to us about it. And they'll actually, so heroin used to be this like antisocial drug. You buy your heroin, you shoot it up alone in the bathroom, and you don't tell anybody you're addicted. Well, because of it's so lethal now, it becomes like this socialized drug. And they'll actually admit to, they'll shoot up on a buddy system, and they'll go out and get their product together, and then they'll go isolate themselves, and one person will stand by with the Narcan while the other person shoots up. If the one person, you know, starts to pass away, they give them the Narcan. When they come back from the Narcan and have nearly died, what do you think that other person does with their product? Do you think they throw it away because they don't want to die? No. They say, are you okay now? If I have to get Narcan? And they hand the Narcan over to their buddy and they shoot themselves up. That's how powerful the addiction is. That's truly where we're at right now with some of these addicts. So it's unless you're there, I don't think you can fully understand it. So that's what we're dealing with. And we really have to work as a community to break down the stigma on that addiction and start to face it together.
I think the other thing I'd just like to say about that too is, you know, it's not you personally, it's not your family, it's surely in our community. And so in some form or fashion we're all impacted. And so if a loved one is struggling with some form of addiction, it really pretty substantially impacts your life, doesn't it? If it's a child, if it's a parent, if it's, you know, that worry. And so again, talking to somebody can help. So heroin use is part of a larger substance abuse problem. When we talk about heroin, here's the progression. So individuals that use alcohol are 2 times likely to become addicted to heroin. As the progression goes up, 3 times more likely if they use marijuana, 15 times more likely if they use cocaine, and then 40 times more likely to be addicted to heroin if they're using opioid painkillers. Typically, on the side, it says too that most use at least 3 other substances or drugs before going to heroin. How can you help? Again, like Mike said, let's break the stigma, foster open communication about the negative effects of addiction, prescription drugs. Addiction is a progressive condition. Early, proactive involvement is key, and persistent in seeking assistance is really important. So even if you're not directly, struggling, but somebody in your family is, definitely talking to somebody will help and can help. Because how many of us, when we're in this situation, can see it clearly? Usually we can't. No matter what kind of an issue it is, whether it be addiction or any other struggle, personal struggle. And again, like with any typical issue, the sooner you get assistance and talk about it, the more likely it is that you'll be able to quickly resolve, hopefully, a satisfactory chance at recovery.
So talk to your doctor. If you take a child to the doctor or a loved one to the doctor, ask the doctor, do they really need a narcotic? If you're going to the doctor and they're trying to give you Percocet or something, ask them, is this necessary? Or, hey, could I just get like 3 days worth? And then we'll take it from there, right? Make sure you're safely storing them and disposing of them instead of handing them to loved ones. Dispose of them like you're supposed to. Remember that if you have a prescription for a narcotic and it was for 30 days supply back in August of 2015, you can no longer use that prescription legally because that's not what it was intended for. It was intended for that 30 days, at which point you should dispose of safely. And don't flush them in our systems because we're finding that stuff in our water system now. So you don't want to flush it. We have, go to the next slide. We're very lucky in our community that we have 5 of these drop boxes at every police department in the county. The one in the city of Sheboygan is open 24/7, so you can come anytime and drop stuff off there. If you have an elderly person that just passed away and they have medicine cabinets full of stuff, you can bring it all to the police stations. All I recommend is if you have a huge supply, just call ahead of time because they might just send a property officer to meet you in the front lobby and take it straight from you as opposed to filling up the drop box right away. But we'll take it all off your hands. It's not an issue. And then on top of those 5 locations, we also have the 2 take-back days, one in spring and one in fall, where we scatter out throughout the county and collect all that stuff too.
It's part of a greater initiative, Healthy Sheboygan 2020. It's one of the things that we are doing to try to get those substances out of the hands of the people that they shouldn't be in. And so, do you know what they do with the medication when you turn it in? It's incinerated, it's burned. I mean, not locally, but they ship it away. And so that's the safe disposal method currently. The other thing I was going to say is when we look at another initiative throughout the county, I may or may not have shared with you, every county in the state of Wisconsin has a needs assessment every 3 years. Look at what is the community, how are they doing, what do they need. And we are currently in the conclusion of a 3-year cycle looking at forecasting for the next 3 years. goal orientation setting. One of the things that was identified early on in the last 3-year cycle was substance heroin. And so a lot of these things are coming about as a result of the needs assessment in the community. And so moving forward, again, we're focusing on and looking at mental health issues. We see high correlation for folks that are struggling with mental health issues, that self-medication. You know, you guys have seen the Kids in Crisis series of articles through the Gandhi Press, yes? You know, mental health services and needs are great, not only for kids but for adults. We're very deficient in not only Sheboygan County but the state of Wisconsin. It's like a ridiculous number. We have 1 to like 10,000, and the recommended is like 1 to 200. It's vastly understaffed. In fact, I know at Aurora we've had a posting for a child psychiatrist for like 12 years. So, again, put some of those correlation pieces together. You know, our county, we struggle with not only substance use, high suicide. We're also doing an initiative on QPR, question, persuade, refer. And we look at folks that are struggling. I know we're also doing a lot of work on mindfulness, you know, kind of bringing it back around, that self-awareness.
So we also have the Wisconsin Prescription Drug Program Monitoring Program now, which is really neat. It's called the PDMP program, but it's kind of a great tool because in law enforcement, if somebody keeps reporting to us that they have their prescription meds stolen, we eventually enter them on this website, and then their doctors can see that and screen like, oh, this person keeps reporting their medication stolen, and they have access to all that stuff. And also it goes the other way around where the DEA actually monitors the website. If they get any red flags on pharmacists or doctors prescribing stuff way too much, they'll actually come to town and visit with them and talk about their prescribing methods. So it helps out both ways.
And this is a recent thing that's occurred, so it's a really good thing. So any physician, nurse practitioner, anyone prescribing a medication for the very first time has to enter this information in the system. So it's a data bank that's being accessed on a regular basis. I guess I kind of jumped ahead.
Yeah, you did jump ahead. You covered that.
Keep in mind and remember that the Sheboygan Falls School District does have employee assistance program, which is direct access and care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to a master's prepared counselor. For you and anyone that lives in your household, if you have an adult child that is going to school in Hawaii or Georgia, Texas, wherever, they get to use the service as well. And so know that there is a resource readily available. And the thing that I love about it is the fact that I said earlier there's significant deficiencies in our community for mental health providers. If I called right now and wanted to get in to see someone because my child was struggling, I would have to probably wait till around July. So accessing and using EAP allows you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a nice starting step. Are we going to be able to assist you in resolving some complex, maybe substance abuse issues? Probably not. But are we going to help you get started and get going in a direction? Absolutely. What questions do you have? Yes. So the question was about methadone clinics. We're struggling. We struggle with that. I know that there is a group called WEIRCO, and anyone that presents at any emergency room locally has a recovery coach. They're asked if they want to talk to someone, a recovery coach, and then they will mobile out and go out on location and start talking with them and coaching them, helping them in whatever way they're able to receive or hear that information.
So there's a methadone clinic on the south side, and I guess is your question what is methadone or?
Yeah, kind of what is it? How do these clinics work?
Well, I'm going to try to be very political with my answer because I don't have a positive one for you on methadone. But methadone is supposed to help weed somebody off heroin addiction. So it gets prescribed at a high amount, and then over time the doses come down. It's supposed to, until they weed them off completely. But obviously there's money to be gained by methadone clinics, and I question whether or not they actually want to weed off their clientele off anything. And I would question whether or not it actually works, and whether or not it itself is not addictive. I think it's an unsafe practice, but that's just my opinion. There's one on the south side in the city of Sheboygan for now. That's what it's supposed to do. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? If there are none, if you could take a few moments